Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to participants joining us on the other side of the Atlantic. Good evening, probably, to someone that's joined us further east. I'm very happy to welcome you on the behalf of the Center for the Study of Democracy to this policy roundtable on the future or the phasing out of fossil gas or natural gas, whatever you prefer. As you know, CSD has been very active in designing joint Euro-Atlantic solutions or practical instruments for coordinating policies and designing practical tools for outlining the key vulnerabilities of European countries vis-a-vis, in particular, the changed positions of Russia's influence, and that has been a game changer. But at the same time, we have the long-term perspective, which is looking into energy transition, which means, and we've all agreed on that, reducing our dependence on fossil fuels, including gas. And look at the news over the weekend. I mean, essentially, we started with, just before that, with a senior member of the European Parliament being arrested for allegedly engaging in corruption activity with a major LNG producer, Qatar. We still don't know the details. Then we've seen here locally in Bulgaria, our prime minister, our president, and ministers, going to Turkey asking for access to their LNG import infrastructure. Turkey itself vying for position to use Russia's dependence on countries like Turkey, but also others, to become a regional gas hub. And at the same time, the White House's special energy envoy, Emma Hostin, making the headlines over the weekend, saying, essentially, we need to balance the need for short-term investment in new gas infrastructure over our long-term goals of reducing our dependence on fossil fuel. And of course, no one knows this better. And the Energy and Climate Security Risk Index that CSD has rolled out, and I'll urge every one of you to look at our website at csd.bg and click around, see what it shows. But it essentially showed that while countries in Central and Eastern Europe have tried for years to extricate themselves from Russia's grip, and this is one additional factor that has kept us awake at night. Germany and Italy did actually make Europe much more dependent on Russian fossil gas after 2014. And what we've seen is also pictures of the first LNG terminals almost ready to receive gas in Germany. And this, of course, comes atop of the blown up pipelines on the north, on the Baltic Sea, and of course the drama that possibly we're not going to get more LNG exports from the US because they need to respond with the respective incentives. So these are just part of the questions we're facing, and of course, we have a pleasure to have a great keynote and panelists today, just to try to tackle some of the issues and see what are the solutions we need to find out to essentially square a circle of having this short-term investment stability and predictability for investors that still can invest in needed gas infrastructure, while at the same time keeping long-term goals of energy transition alive and well. And with that, let me introduce our keynote speaker today, Melanie Kenderdine from the Energy Futures Initiative. She's a principal at the Energy Futures Initiative, but also a good partner, a friend of CSD, with whom we've worked on the Energy and Climate Security Risk Index. And we hope that we're going to provide some of the solutions. Melanie did develop with the EFI, develop a global future of natural gas study, to which CSD and the Oxford Energy Institute were European partners. And I see that they're going to provide an update in January to that, much needed, of course, because a lot changed in just a year's time since we last presented it, just before the war in Ukraine broke out. But I think EFI provides some of the great global solutions to the energy dilemmas of the energy and climate dilemmas of the day. Melanie has a long career in the US administration. Last, she was also the coordinator of the quadrennial energy review of the US administration of the Department of Energy during the Obama administration, and Secretary Muniz at the Department of Energy. Melanie, it is my great pleasure to welcome you, and thank you for joining us for this webinar, and we look forward to your great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and Ruslan and Martin and all my friends at CSD. Ruslan told me I had to talk very quickly, so forgive me for rushing through this. Could be a problem for the interpreters, I don't know. But let me just say, start out. Now, I'm going to give an overview, okay, a broad overview on not a deep focus on Southeast Europe. That's your expertise. And so I'm going to start with a broad overview. And we'll just start off by saying the Russian invasion of Ukraine raises both nuclear weapons and energy security concerns. I think there was another threat yesterday about the use of nuclear weapons. The responses of the US and its allies are critical for maintaining global stability and security in the months and years ahead. And from an energy perspective, we need thoughtful policies and actions and to help establish clearer pathways for deep decarbonization while meeting energy security concerns. I think we are seeing firsthand that those both have to work hand in hand. And so let me pull up my slides here. Okay, can you all see them?
Yep. If you could just start the slideshow,
okay, there we
please.
go.
Thank you.
All right. And so let me give a little background here. And as Ruslan mentioned, I was at the Department of Energy in the Obama administration with Secretary Muniz when Russia invaded Crimea. When that happened, I went to the Secretary and said, our energy security principles have been all focused on oil. We need to modernize them. We drafted a set of energy security principles, took them to the energy ministers of G7 in Rome, negotiated them in Rome, and then they were adopted in 2014 by the leaders in Brussels. And so developing flexible, transparent, competitive energy markets, including gas markets. I edited this last night and didn't take out, this should be developed there at the end. Improving energy system resilience by promoting infrastructure modernization, diversifying energy fuel sources and routes, and encouraging the development of indigenous sources of energy. We were a little surprised by Nord Stream 2, given that Germany signed on to this, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, supporting energy efficiency, deploying clean energy and sustainable technologies, supporting emergency and enhancing emergency response systems. And two that we didn't think of in 2014, cybersecurity. I would go back to the G7 and say they need to modernize these again, and and supply chains for key metals and minerals. Okay, and so two things that weren't on the radar in 2014 that are now. This is Russian natural gas flows to the EU. January 2019 through July of 2022, and going from approximately 500 million cubic meters in 2019 to 100 million cubic meters June 2022. The experts are now saying it's highly unlikely that Russia will deliver 60 BCM of pipe gas in 2023, and it would be more like 25 BCM. So this is 2022. You're looking at 25 BCM in 2023. And so non-Russian suppliers have limited upside potential. Lots of consumers in Europe looking to Azerbaijan and Norway, and they have ramped up their production, but they're almost at capacity, as is Algeria, although Algeria is bringing some more things online. This is a U.S. LNG by vessel and pipeline export destinations 2018 and 2021. So this is before Ukraine, okay? And so not much before, but before. And this is Mexico pipeline gas. I'm sorry, it's not pipeline. This is LNG, okay? Caribbean increase in volumes, Mexico way down, but Caribbean way up in volumes, not so much in percentage. Central and South America, a substantial increase in volumes and small increase in percentages. Europe, look at this, up now 34% of US LNG. Mideast, Asia, look at the increases in volumes there. That's Mexican pipeline exports way up, although it's LNG exports volumetrically are way down. It's pipeline exports are way up because we built pipelines to Mexico. Canada up a little bit. And here are the percentages, okay? And what is amazing to me when you look at these percentages, Europe in 3 years before Ukraine, up 686%. And Asia, which had huge volumes already, up almost 200%. Our total exports increased by 1,883% between 2016 and 2021. All of that goes to OECD countries, and US exports of LNG via vessel increased 229%. So big changes before Ukraine. And this is what's happened, just a few countries examples, changes in US LNG between 2020 and 2022. So after Ukraine, you can see France up 400%, Portugal 405%, Netherlands almost 300%, Spain 117%, all of Europe 304% increase. In 2020, it was 45% of US exports. In 2022, 67% of US exports. So US has been a major supplier of LNG to Europe in this crisis. I have heard from our Asian trading partners who are nervous about this, and I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. This is export terminal capacity. So you can see here, this is operating. So North America and the MENA region, you can see where Europe is going to have to look, and where other countries might be competing with the US. So that's LNG export terminals under construction. Again, the MENA region, quite a bit more than the US. And in development, there, North America has a very, very significant advantage over the MENA region. Lots of projects in development. I'll say a little bit about that right now. And these are US export terminals. I think this is as of October 2022. So FERC approved, our regulatory agency approved under construction almost 12 BCF a day, approved not under construction 15, almost 16 BCF a day. I did this same figure in March, right after Ukraine invasion, that FERC approved under construction was only 3.7 BCF a day. So we have rapidly approved and put under construction almost 8, 9 BCF a day, okay, since the Russian invasion. And so expediting that as rapidly as possible. And this is LNG import terminals existing and under construction. So this is capacity of operating, and look at the difference again. This is who the competition for supplies of LNG, looking at Europe and Asia there, and big difference existing. Import terminals under construction, Asia again, a lot more. And this is as of June of 2021. Okay, I'll say a little bit more about what's happened since then in Europe, but this is just to give you a sense of where the activity is and where the competition is for LNG supplies. It also, when you look at Asia there, I would say Russia is looking for markets for its gas now. So Asia is obviously the clear target. And just very rapidly, this is your natural gas pricing index, gone pretty far down, getting back closer to normal in months ahead, big decline, okay? And as you all, I'm sure, are aware, EU gas storage levels to get Europe through the winter are at 95% capacity. So very significant buildup of storage capacity to get through the winter. Next year is a greater concern, a lot of concern as China comes out of its COVID lockdown. In the coming year, you're going to see a lot more activity and demand for LNG in China. Right now, not so much. Russian gas imports eliminated by 2025. This is how it could be done, okay? And this is a European gas hub recommendations. And what you're seeing there, those are the Russian gas imports in 2020, 152 billion cubic meters. And these are the amounts that the gas hub says could be achieved if 32, you could reduce demand in Europe by 32 billion cubic meters. If for full implementation of the Fit for 55 program, the European Commission program, 13 additional energy efficiency measures, additional heat pumps and electrification, 25, additional renewable electricity, 31 BCM, and then their non-Russian imports. So that's where the U.S. comes into play, and Qatar and Algeria, et cetera, et cetera. So this is LNG, EU LNG import terminals under construction and planned in 2021. So this is showing you the planned facilities as well. And red type is under construction, planned is green type. And so you see there Finland, Poland, and Cyprus under construction in 2021, planned. And I'll say some of these now are under construction, particularly in Germany and in Germany for sure. But look at the planned large volumes of planned LNG imports under construction, and look at Ireland, Germany, and France. Big planned volumes of LNG imports. This is just showing you all where it could be coming from in the near future. And Malta, they didn't have the numbers in the reference that I looked at. And as you all know, I think Germany is supporting 5 floating floating terminals, regas terminals, and I think they completed one last week. So they completed it in 189 days, very, very unheard of, a rapid completion. So these are imported gas planned pipelines to import gas into the EU. And I don't have all of them on here. There's a significant number of and volumes and miles of pipelines being planned. But what you do here, that's the Baltic Pipeline project, Denmark, Poland, and Sweden, 613 kilometers long. There you've got Bulgaria, Romania, the White Stream, North Macedonia, Bulgaria interconnections, 303 kilometers. Ionian Adriatic gas pipeline in Croatia. This one I thought was very interesting. Nigeria, Morocco gas pipeline to Spain, 617 kilometers. But there are a little more data, 16 gas pipelines under construction, 3,200 kilometers at about $6.5 billion in cost. That's going on right now. And 62 proposed gas pipeline projects. So this is just to give you an example, and those numbers are more comprehensive. It wouldn't have made any sense on a slide. You wouldn't have been able to read it. But I just wanted to give you some examples there. I mentioned at the outset, you can't forget climate change as we are dealing with the energy security issues. And what you're seeing here is the carbon intensity of a typical LNG supply chain. And over here you have downstream emissions, 75% of the total, and other emissions, excluding downstream emissions, 25% of the total. Then this is your LNG chain. 50% of emissions are from upstream gas production, processing, and transportation emissions. 33% from liquefaction. Right now, these are very important to the United States because we are supplying a lot of gas to both Europe and Asia. Shipping emissions, 16% of total. I would say to you all, those shipping emissions are counted in no country's nationally determined contribution. So at some point, we're going to have to deal with shipping emissions and how those get calculated and to whom they get attributed, and they're substantial. So a big percentage, and those are regasification emissions. So from a European perspective, where you're doing a lot of regasification, you're increasing emissions, but it's very small increase, 1%. So just a little, another thing that we are all going to have to work on. And I'm going to switch, that's natural gas. And I wanted to go through a couple of other energy security concerns, and then I will wrap up before Ruslan shuts me off, okay, disconnects me. The one is nuclear power. And these are EU member states with nuclear power plants operating and under construction, EU members without nuclear plants, non-EU operating under construction, and non-EU without. So Bulgaria here, EU member with nuclear power plants operating and under construction. EU depends on nuclear power for about a quarter of its electricity. And it's very dependent on Russian nuclear services. In 2021, Russia provided the 28% of enrichment, 20% of enrichment services to EU utilities. That's from Russia. And I would say one other issue that people aren't thinking very much about on this is the VVER reactor units. I think Bulgaria has 5 or 6 of them. Czech Republic has VVER units, Ukraine and Slovakia. Those are Russian reactors, and Russia has agreed to take the waste when using the VVER reactors. That's leverage that Russia has over countries in Europe. and could create a waste problem in the future if these issues are not resolved. It also gives them leverage. And so here's just a percentage of nuclear power. Belgium, it's 51%, Bulgaria, 35%, Czech Republic, 37%, and Finland, 33%. So I just wanted to give you an overview, a concern about fuel and nuclear waste as issues that are raised for Europe by Russian concerns. I'm sorry, Moldova, they're at 47%, and Slovakia, 52%. I didn't realize I put this many on. It was the middle of the night. Okay, sorry, sorry. And then finally, one other issue, and I said a little bit about it, is metals and minerals. And metals and minerals, just to give you a picture of what that means. This is green electrification and copper demand. And it was 1,000 kilotons total world demand in 2020 was 1,000 kilotons. In 2030, 7 years from now, 8 years from now, China alone will be 1,400 kilotons. Europe, 1,000 kilotons, and the US, 700 kilotons. So huge growing demand for copper, EVs and wind turbines. They both use huge amounts of copper. Look at this. This is your electric vehicle compared to an internal combustion engine. Uses internal combustion engine uses 48 pounds of copper. An electric vehicle uses 183 pounds of copper. So the US and its allies are all going to be competing for this copper, but there's another issue with that as well. IEA says that in its sustainable development scenario, by 2030, there'll be 140 million EVs on the road. That will require 11.6 million metric tons of copper just for EVs. So we're all competing for copper, but I looked at the US, industries are competing, industry subsectors are competing as well. You see there, building construction, 43% of our copper right now, electrical and electronic products, 21%, transportation equipment, 19%, consumer and general products, 10%, et cetera, et cetera. So we're competing with allies and trading partners, and we're also competing within industrial subsectors. We need to be paying attention to that. And this is what's happened to the price of copper in 5 years. That's what happens when you get that kind of demand. And I'm going to skip this slide. This just shows you the forums that we could be, that we should be using to address all of these issues. It's got our top 15 US trade reps, top 15 and G20 members, G7 members, Russia's a member of the G20, and quadrilateral security dialogue of the Biden administration, and OECD members and parties to TPP agreement. So those are all forums where issues that I just raised today, we should be raising and discussing in these forums and managing these issues. So I'm going to end it there. All right. So if I can figure out how to end it.
Thank you so much, Melanie. That's been impressive, a really unique global view. And this is precisely what we need both in Europe and Southeast Europe. I think this has been one of the ideas we've been trying to develop, and thanks to you and the Energy Futures Initiative for helping us out develop this in practical tools like the Energy and Climate Security Risk Index. I hope that we'll be joined by others in that. But again, I mean, it's always a pleasure to have you and give us this really global overview of a deep understanding of both of the technological market and geopolitical perspectives. I think it's important that we will continue leading this dialogue. I look forward to today's discussion, also to EFI's roundtable in January in DC on the global gas update, and also CSD will be following up then February and March. I think the war in Ukraine, of course, made things much more complicated, but still we're facing the same underlying issues that we'll need to be facing. With that, I thank you again. I mean, and we look forward to the panel discussion, and then hopefully we'll be able to stay for the discussion afterwards. I now would like to turn it to my colleague Martin Volodymyrov, who is the Director for Energy and Climate at CSD. And just to remind everyone that you could post your questions in the chat, and the interpretation in Bulgarian and English you could change from your menu down below on the Zoom app. Thanks again, Melody, for that unique global view, and we'll look forward to the discussion. Martin, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ruslan, and thank you to side as well. I mean, it's great to see this global perspective, and I hope we can, join forces and extend the work on the index and the energy security risk assessment in the future. Now, I would like to zoom in on Southeastern Europe, which used to be called in the Ottoman Empire times the dark corner of Europe, because it was very difficult to assess exactly what is happening. And this is especially true in the area of energy security and energy policy in general. So we have a great panel of amazing experts on energy security and natural gas who try to shed some light on this dark corner with a focus on the future of natural gas. Really the Kremlin's most powerful geopolitical weapon this year, which is at the core of the unprecedented energy crisis. And Southeastern Europe is probably the most vulnerable area because it has been excessively dependent on fossil fuel imports from Russia, and is a region which is yet to amend to change its long-term energy policy framework and to put it in line with the EU's long-term decarbonization objectives, but also global energy and climate security targets. Before we begin the panel discussion, Ruslan already reminded you, I'm just repeating, you can use the chat and the Q&A section to state your queries, and I'll be happy to address them to the relevant speaker during the discussion. And you can also switch the translation at this panel as well. And now I'm happy to turn the mic to our esteemed panelists. They'll try to seek answers to the following questions which we defined before the event. How will Southeast Europe face the challenge of potential gas shortages this and next winter, and especially in times of surging prices? What are the most viable strategies for phasing out Russian gas? What are the energy and climate security implications of a gas phase out, actually? And finally, what will be the role of natural gas in the long-term energy and climate strategy of the region and Europe in general? First, I'd like to give the floor to my colleague, Constanța Ranghelova, who is a senior analyst at CSD's Energy and Climate Program. And she will share some of our insights from a study on energy and climate security risks in Europe, which we published back in September, and some of the perspectives from this assessment on the development of a natural gas phase-out strategy for the region. Constanța, the floor is yours. Just a quick reminder to all speakers, please limit your presentations to 7 minutes as to allow enough time for discussion after that. Constanța, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Martin. I hope that everyone can see my slides well. So as Martin said, my focus will be on gas phase-out strategies for Southeast Europe and what are the implications for energy and climate security. And CSD has been working together with our partners from Agora Energiewende, Artelis and Wuppertal Institute, and other leading policy institutes all across Europe on modeling gas phase-out pathways for the region. And we are very happy to also have Andreas Graf here with us today, who has been spearheading this project. And what we wanted to do is to really distill these results specifically for Southeast Europe, and in particular, Bulgaria, Greece, and Romania, the preliminary results we have, and put them through the perspective of what this means for energy and climate security using CSD's Energy and Climate Security Risk Index. And just a very brief overview for those of you that still haven't heard of this new tool that we have developed, this is a data-driven instrument that enables policymakers to better monitor and compare energy and climate security vulnerabilities of different member states. And here you can see its 4 pillars, and each of the pillar has different mini indicators. So we have in total more than 40 indicators that together make up the final index. And in this particular case today, we will mostly talk about natural gas. And when we talk about natural gas, a lot of the risks that we talk about are related to geopolitics, and in particular, the security of natural gas imports, and of course, in the implications of the current energy crisis and affordability risks. So what we have done is we have assessed what are the main geopolitical risks for 5 European countries, which you can see here, and the European Union as a whole. And this is one of the indicators of the geopolitical pillar of our index, which is the security of natural gas imports. And here you can see the results for 2015 and 2021 for the piloted countries that we have. And what our results showed is that we have a major problem related mostly to an excessive reliance on imports of natural gas from Russia, and an overall very high dependence on natural gas as in general across the European Union. And Southeast Europe has historically been one of the most vulnerable countries in that respect, both because they have historically had a very high reliance on Russian gas and on imported gas in general, but also because of the affordability risks that I will discuss later on. And what we have seen over the past several years, so basically ever since the annexation of Crimea in 2014 and the eve of the war in Ukraine, is that we had very limited progress on the side from several Southeast European countries on improving their security of natural gas imports. In the case of Bulgaria, we had some limited diversification efforts. Same we had in Greece, but at the same time, we had countries such as Italy and Germany, which were going in the completely opposite direction. So both Italy and Germany increased their reliance on Russian natural gas between 2015 and 2021. And this was the most important contributor to an overall increase of the risks for the European Union as a whole, because these 2 countries alone accounted for 50% of the increase of imports of Russian natural gas for the whole European Union between 2014 and 2021. And this is what we call a part of what we call the great energy and climate security divide, because without such instruments, it's very difficult to monitor how different countries are going in different directions when it comes to supposedly common European goals. Now, natural gas also has important affordability risks associated with it. And this is primarily what we are seeing currently with the energy crisis. So we have extremely high natural gas prices. And part of that is because of the natural gas supply cuts from Russia. And these very high natural gas prices are reverberating through the electricity market. We also have a high reliance on fossil fuels in general, and oil, and high prices there also contributing. And this is increasing affordability risks all across the EU. As you can see here, the comparison between 2015 and 2021. Decrease in risks in Bulgaria and Romania is mostly associated with the lack of market liberalization, which has to a certain extent muted the price increase relative to what has been happening on the whole European level. But overall, what we are seeing is very strong pressure that may not be visible to end consumers to the same extent everywhere, but in the same time, they weigh, for example, on government budgets. And Greece has been one of the countries that has seen one of the biggest increases in affordability risks, together with Italy and Germany. And the high reliance of Greece on natural gas, especially in the power sector, has played a very important role here. And now comes the question about what do we do? So we answered the question, how did we come here? How did we get here? but what do we do next? And part of the solution is to think about how do we phase out Russian gas and natural gas more generally. But this challenge is very different depending on which of the three countries that we are looking at, we're talking about, because the gas reliance problem is different in terms of magnitude across the three countries. So Bulgaria has the smallest natural gas consumption with about 3 BCM or almost 30 terawatt hours, and Romania has the highest with about 80 terawatt hours. So gas phase out is also a very big, very different challenge depending on what the gas is used for, because in Bulgaria, we are very fortunate in the sense that our building sector is not as reliant on natural gas, but at the same time, this is mostly a challenge for industry. Meanwhile, when we look at Greece, it's the electricity sector, and in Romania, the building sector are the ones that have the greatest natural gas consumption. And this means that we need a national targeted strategic approach that works on how do we phase out natural gas. And this is part of what we have been doing with our partners from Agora, Artelis, and Wuppertal. And some of the preliminary results we have, especially for buildings and industry, have allowed us to say how much gas demand can we save by 2030. And for Bulgaria, Greece, and Romania, this varies between 20 and 30%. And this could translate into direct reductions of natural gas imports from Russia. And of course, this helps to a different extent the different countries. But overall, for all of these countries, this will translate into better security of natural gas imports. So the dependence on Russian gas is the greatest in Bulgaria. And of course, the natural gas demand reduction potential that we have assessed from the industry and buildings would not be enough to fully displace reliance on Russian gas alone, but still it plays a very important role. And when we look at Romania, this is the least dependent country on Russian gas. As you can see here, these are the figures for 2021. But also, unlike Bulgaria and Greece, Romania is not 100% dependent on imports to meet its domestic demand. And here, reducing demand brings Romania closer and closer to energy independence, which also contributes very strongly to higher security of natural gas imports. And just so that we do not talk about gas phase out without digging into what this means in terms of replacement or reduction potentials, these are some of the preliminary results that we have. Of course, I will not go too much into the detail because, as I said, these are not final results, but this basically shows us the combined demand potential for Bulgaria, Romania, and Greece together, and what changes we could see by 2030. And what you can see from these charts is that efficiency gains, which are reflected in the reduced demand between 2018 and 2030, is one of the biggest contributors, but also we need to have electrification, especially in industry. And we have in the building sector a double challenge. We need to, at the same time, phase out gas, but at the same time, we need to also phase out traditional firewood. And here, the role of heat pumps can really not be overstated. But overall, this is a great challenge that will require a lot of investments and a very strategic policy approach across all the three countries. And we would be very happy to share the final results with you early next year and to discuss what this means for energy and climate security. But just this preliminary view, I guess, will pique your attention. So when we have put these results through our energy and climate security risk index, and we asked ourselves, how would this gas phase out potential translate into reducing energy and climate security? We tried to do several things. So we assessed what kind of a import reduction we could have from Russia, and then tried to think about what potential other measures could be implemented. So here you have the results for the three countries, Bulgaria, Romania, and Greece. And starting for Bulgaria, so we do remain 100% dependent on imports, so this cannot change. But a lot less of that natural gas is coming from Russia, which means that the volumes that we have already secured from countries like Azerbaijan will cover a much larger part of our demand. Currently, that's 1/3. And reducing our demand overall would naturally improve diversification, so to say, and improve our import security and the security of our import mix. When it comes to Romania, the improvement is also very significant, even though it's not as dependent on Russian gas. And this is because what I mentioned earlier, we have this reduction of demand bringing Romania closer to energy independence, which also plays a very important role in reducing overall security of natural gas import risks. And then when we come to Greece, the reduction is very small. Currently, it's not as visible on the chart, but we still have a reduction of 1% versus 2021 levels. And here we have Greece again remaining 100% or almost dependent on imports, but we have lower reliance on Russia, which improves the overall diversity of the supply of the import mix. However, we also see that there is a potential for a smarter, more well-balanced import mix, especially when it comes to LNG, which could further improve the security of natural gas imports in addition to demand reduction. So just to very quickly conclude, because I don't want to overstep my 7 minutes, we have a very challenging winter ahead. I didn't spend too much time talking about these challenges, but as you realize, this winter will be difficult, but next winter will be even more difficult, especially if we cannot fill our gas storages with Russian gas over the coming summer. And as the IEA's most recent report presented today said, avoiding gas shortages next year will be a challenge and will require a very big package of different measures. But of course, the emergency measures we need right now, especially in Southeast Europe, is financial protection for vulnerable consumers. And this is something that cannot really be overstated. We are currently in a situation of let's say, high-level fuel subsidies that do not really target vulnerable consumers. And this is what we need if we really want to be efficient in government spending for tackling the current crisis. This might mean additional coal-fired electricity on the regional level at the moment, but not in the long term. And we, of course, need to maximize alternative gas imports and maximize gas savings. But looking forward, which is even more important than the emergency measures right now, we cannot really base our investment decisions right now on short-term emergency signals that we're receiving from the market right now. And this means that the large gas infrastructure projects that we have could lead to gas lock-in or stranded assets, and we need to take that risk into consideration when we plan these investments. So a more sustainable improvement of Southeast Europe's climate and energy and climate security would focus again on tackling energy poverty by empowering energy poor consumers to become prosumers and part of the green transition. And of course, by supporting a transformational shift in industry that is based on innovation. So with that, I would like to conclude and thank you for your attention. I hope we didn't overstep too much.
Thank you, Constanza. It was very interesting indeed. Yeah, you went a bit over time, but that's fine. I think everyone benefited from the great analysis. Now I'd like to welcome Andreas Graf, who is a senior associate with a focus on EU energy policy at the German Institute Agora Energiewende. He's also the leader of the project that Constanza mentioned on analyzing different scenarios for gas phase out in Southeastern Europe. This cutting-edge assessment that started in the aftermath of the Russian invasion and plays a critical role, I think, in the decision-making of the European Commission on this issue. Andreas, the floor is yours. Looking forward to the findings.
Thank you very much. Yes, so I think Constanza presented some of the basic findings for the countries in question, and so I will also not be providing another presentation, so I will spare your eyes here from many more slides. Maybe a few things to be said, though, more generally about the scenarios we're doing. They're mainly looking at the kind of structural investments and changes to the power industry and building sector that will need to happen for us to not only phase out natural gas, Russian natural gas over the coming decade, but rather also meet our long-term decarbonization objectives, and especially climate neutrality by 2050. And regardless of which country we're looking at, and we look at 9 different countries in the region, the fundamental levers are always the same. In the power sector, it's about mainly deploying solar and wind. In the building sector, it's about scaling building renovations. It's about deploying heat pumps. It's about also deploying a range of other renewable heating technologies, such as geothermal and solar thermal. And in industry, it's specifically with regards to natural gas consumption, again, largely about efficiency and electrification of different process heating options. So especially in the lower temperature range of 100 to 200 degrees and below, heat pumps and other direct electrification technologies can often supplant natural gas in industry, and there's a really great potential for us to significantly reduce natural gas consumption in industry. So that, regardless of which country I would be showing you, the results are almost always the same. There are different building stocks. There are different current consumption patterns for natural gas in buildings, industry, and power across the EU, but the fundamental levers are always the same. So what I would rather like to share with you today is just a few more observations that I think might be interesting for this discussion. So the first is that I really do believe on the demand side, the energy crisis has fundamentally changed the economic picture for renewables and clean heating technologies. So before the energy crisis, especially in Southeast Europe, we were still in a situation where, on the one hand, solar technology costs had come down, for example, and had gotten very cheap. However, you still had slightly higher capital costs, but especially you had often very low electricity prices for retail consumers. So even though costs had come down, and the economics often didn't pan out, and at the same time, natural gas was so cheap for heating that heat pumps, in many cases, simply didn't make sense. I mean, this was different from country to country and application to application, but nonetheless, this has fundamentally changed. So with the increase in electricity prices, and it depends, of course, on which customer group you're talking about, but especially for commercial customers now, you're seeing a completely different picture with regards to the economics of solar PV. So especially where energy price interventions have not capped the price of electricity, consumers are looking at much higher prices and a much higher incentive to deploy rooftop PV. This probably also explains why the governments in the region have been very quick to accelerate permitting and connections of solar PV in the region. It's essentially a no-brainer from an economic standpoint at this point, but it's also perhaps the best measure to protect your industry is to allow them to invest and to reduce the costs that they have. The same is true, however, for heating. So while there are energy price interventions currently still that are trying to artificially keep the cost of natural gas low for consumers, those are starting to unravel because they're completely unsustainable. And what we're seeing now is essentially the basic economics pan out. The higher the gas price comes, and we believe those to be structural, the more it will just simply make sense to reduce the cost, reduce your energy consumption, but also to deploy heat pumps, which are just a very efficient technology. And so we think those trends are here to stay. And even when prices maybe over the medium term come down a little bit, they will never come down to the levels we saw before. Secondly, the Fit for 55 package was mentioned earlier, and there were some numbers as to what contribution it could make in the 2030 perspective. The Fit for 55 package is still broadly on track. There was some speculation early on in the crisis and some, let's say, political opinions as to how the EU should shift its attention away from climate and energy and the EU Green Deal in the wake of the crisis. We are not seeing that in Brussels. I can only underline that. If anything, the European Commission has put a whole set of additional measures on the table with Repower EU and its communication and measures that just underline the urgency. I'm not convinced that we are going to see all of the additional measures with Repower EU adopted in the final legislation, but there's absolutely no reason to believe that the level of ambition that was proposed for Fit for 55 will not be finally agreed by lawmakers. So we're going to see a range of different policy instruments, I believe, put into place over the coming decades that really enshrine some of this action and provide legislative guardrails for policymakers in the region, and will drive policy action even beyond, let's say, the current sensitivities of lawmakers. Third, I believe we have a certain risk now also with regards to solid biomass use in the region, but also Europe as a whole. I think this is a really important point. So it's already been brought up that solid biomass is something that's still used in wide scale in the region for especially decentralized heating. What we've seen, especially over the summer, was a rush across the entire continent, essentially, to install new biomass heating appliances, new demand for wood pellets, but also all kinds of other forms of bioenergy. This is driving up costs. This is driving up demand, and not only risks unsustainable demands on our forests, and so there are kind of biodiversity and environmental impact concerns we should be aware of, but also is increasing prices for the most vulnerable and low-income consumers in our society. So if they're heating with solid biomass today, they have not been left unimpacted by the crisis, because those markets are to some extent also European markets at this point in time. And so we should keep that in mind, but we should also keep it in mind for our long-term environmental goals. Fourth, the transition away, it requires significant investments. Some of the early results that Costanza highlighted also point to about 40 billion euros of investment for these three countries just for buildings alone. That's not just public investment, but we do assume that countries will have to support this investment for both commercial and residential consumers if we want to see deployment at that scale, but we also want to see a socially just transition. A lot of the EU funds that are currently being mobilized in the Fit for 55 would cover a very, very large share actually of those investments. However, they have to be put to good use. And currently we're not seeing governments necessarily put public money to the best use. So I think we have a big challenge ahead to make sure that that investment happens. It is socially just, supported by governments, but also in a more targeted way and in a more sensible way. And finally, I would just highlight that we also need to really focus a lot more on the human capacity side of this challenge. So all of these levers I was talking about, all of these different technologies that we need to achieve this transition require a lot of human capacity. But that's not just on the side of installers of solar PV and the installers of heat pumps, for example, or the construction workers renovating your home. It's also government capacity. So it's about putting the staff at national, regional, and local level in place so that we can get permitting adopted, that we can get the kind of requests for support adopted, that we can get heat planning rolled out. All of these require human capacity and human resources that we should not forget, and they're just as valuable often as the money we put into energy infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andreas. This is a very good overview of the technological details on the phase out and what is feasible and what is not. And now for a more long-term policy vision and a regulatory overview of how a natural gas can happen, I would like to give the floor to Dr. Ivan Ivanov, who is the chairman of the Bulgarian Energy and Water Regulatory Commission, who will share Bulgaria's vision for the future of natural gas supply and the role that Bulgaria will play in Southeastern Europe. Dr. Ivanov, the floor is yours. And sorry for the reminder, but please limit yourself to 7 minutes discussion. Thank you.
Благодаря, Мартине. Разбира се, най-напред искам да изкажа благодарност на организаторите в лицето на Центъра за изследване на демокрацията. Освен това, да отбележа, че докладите, които изнесаха Констанция и Мелани, бяха достатъчно задълбочени и като се надявам в последствие Центъра да осигури възможността да се ползват тези доклади, тъй като съдържат много данни, които наистина могат да бъдат ориентир в анализи, които правим. Относно природния газ, искам, разбира се, да насоча вниманието към неговото използване в България, но преди това ще отбележа, че природният газ се явява един от фосилните енергоизточници, но категорично най-слабо замърсяващия по отношение на въглищата и на петрола. Именно това е причината, поради която природният газ беше определен като последния фосилен източник, който трябва да напусне сцената на европейските пазари на енергийни източници до 2050 година. Като преходно гориво или преходен енергоизточник, заедно, разбира се, с ядрената енергетика. Това, което обаче е съществено и е ново в настоящата година, е основният урок, който ние трябва да научим от войната в Украйна, а именно, че природният газ, това важи, разбира се, другите фосилни източници, говорим за природният газ, когато се добива на територията на тоталитарни или откровено диктаторски режими, се превръща вече в едно геополитическо оръжие, оръжие за натиск, оръжие за изнудване. От тук следва извода, че Европа трябва да се освободи сравнително бързо от зависимостта си от външно доставени фосилни енергийни източници. В това отношение, разбира се, трябва да видим какво е положението в България и дали се достига до тази криза, която беше многократно повтарена в рамките на дискусията, водена в последните месеци. Ще отбележа, че процента на използване на природния газ като енергиен източник в страната ни е значително по-малък, отколкото процента на използване на въглищата, както и на петрола като енергоизточник. Независимо от това, има сегменти, в които природният газ се явява изключително важен. На първо място, това е използването на природния газ за производство на електрическа енергия, така наречените газови, а има и парогазови централи. Техното основно предимство се явява обстоятелството, че могат много бързо да бъдат въведени в действие и се явяват и като компенсиращи мощности по отношение на непрекъснато нарастващите възобновяеми енергийни източници. Лови в България, преди всичко, това е само ТЕЦ Варна, който разполага с 3 блока по 210 мегавата, общо 630 мегавата, които обаче в момента не са използвани поради актуалните цени на природния газ. Но това е едната необходимост използване на природния газ. Втората, което е важно, това е безспорно използването на природния газ като суровина. България има силно развита химическа промишленост. За нея природния газ е суровина, без която не може тази промишленост да работи. Също се касае за стъкларската промишленост по определен начин и цементовата. Това е втория сегмент. Но има, разбира се, и трети сегмент и това е използването на природния газ за производство на водород. В момента 78% от производството на водород е на базата на природен газ. Само 4% на базата на възобновяеми източници и 18% на базата на кафявите въглища. И когато говорим за България, нека все пак кажа, че не е нормална перспективата използването на природния газ да завърши предсрочно, когато до 2038 година предишното правителство предвижда да излязат от действие въглищните централи. Те трябва определено да напуснат сцената преди природния газ, поради обстоятелството, че природния газ в пъти изхвърля по-малки емисии в атмосферата. За да може обаче природния газ да бъде използван в България по един рационален начин, първото и най-важно условие безспорно е диверсификация на доставките. Мисля, че Констанца даде резултати, които са, може би, валидни към 27 април, когато все още в България се доставяше преобладаващо руски газ. В момента зависимостта на България от руския газ е нула. Повтарям, нула в последните месеци и така се очертава да бъде и в следващите години. Надявам се при разумно управление на българската енергетика. Нещо повече. След провеждането на публични открити търгове за външни доставчици на природен газ се достигнаха цени, които са по-ниски, отколкото ако доставчик ни беше Газпром Експорт, което беше до 27 април тази година. В последствие ще отбележа, че диверсификацията на доставките е свързана с ангажимента на България към Европейския съюз, към изграждането на вертикалния газов коридор. И в това отношение тази година е ключова за страната ни, защото изграждането на Комотини Стара Загора осигурява 3 милиарда кубични метра годишно, с перспектива да нараснат на 5 милиарда кубични метра по направлението юг-север, с по-нататъчно пренос до Украйна и до Полша. Второто, което е важно, е за следващата година. Очертава се до края на следващата година да бъде завършен терминала за регазификация в Александруполис, в което България има 20% от акциите. При завършването на този терминал България ще има гарантирани слотове и ще може да получава природен газ от която и да е точка на земното кълбо. Разбира се, има се преди от Съединените щати, от Катар, от Алжир. И в това отношение също има сериозна перспектива напред. Очевидно, природният газ, колкото и да се търсят начини да напусне по-бързо сцената на енергийните доставки, това няма да се случи и нека забележим. Канцлера на Федералната република посети Катар и подписа дългосрочен договор, който ще почне да се изпълнява от 2026 година. Мисля, че беше за 15 години напред. Когато една Германия предвижда природния газ да продължава да бъде важен енергиен ресурс, не трябва да повече по-малко да отчитаме този елемент. Би трябвало природния газ наистина да бъде, както беше заложено, последния фосилен енергоизточник, който напуска сцената на енергийни доставки. Разширяването на нашите газови връзки с Турция, ако между Боташ и Булгартрансгаз се подпише споразумение за трансгранично транспортиране на природния газ, това дава достатъчно около 15 милиарда кубични метра годишно, които могат да бъдат доставени през терминалите за регазификация в Мраморно море, респективно след това през Кардан, Негрова вода, това количество може да бъде изнасяно на север. И ако изобщо се реализират проектите, за които толкова говори Ердоган, Турция да стане газов хъб, за да изнася към Европа, това трябва категорично да се каже, че ще стане преди всичко през България. През Гърция, разбира се, преминава Южен газов коридор, газопровода ТАП. Той в момента принася само 8 милиарда кубични метра към Италия и по единица за Гърция и за България. Дори да се увеличи, това ще стане след време. България има възможност да остане трайно на доставките на природен газ за региона. По този начин да имаме сигурни доставки и да имаме енергийна независимост. Благодаря ви.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ivanov, and thank you for the broad vision of how diversification can happen in Bulgaria and for your optimism about the ability of Bulgaria to attract alternative supply, including from the US. Hopefully, you're not that right about the gas lock-in, and we can find an alternative way to accelerate this process, but let's see what happens. And now I'm really happy to welcome Dimitri Lalas, who is a senior associate at the Greek company Phaseout, one of the best energy and climate modelers in Europe, I would say, not only in the region. Dimitri, the floor is yours. And I'm sorry, this is the fate of the latter speakers. Can you please limit yourselves to 5-6 minutes? Thank you, Dimitri. We can't hear you. Can you unmute?
Yeah, I did. I said with this great introduction and compliments, I will certainly try to make my comments below 5 minutes so we can move on. First of all, I need to go through some of the latest developments in Greece. As you know, we have been, the plans are for a number of FSRUs in Greece, some in advanced stages, some in not so much so. But lately, in the last couple of months, or sorry, maybe 5 months, an additional one to the ones already in planning has been added. So indeed, we're going to end up having 6 terminals under construction or in planning. Some of them have gone through market tests, and some of them have gone through compulsory market tests. So they're moving ahead. All of those terminals, which are spread in the Aegean, there are none in the Ionian Sea, basically will it is planned that they will go online sometime between 2023, next year, like toward the end, in the Alexandroupolis one, until 2025. That is what the plans are for the latest one in Volos, which, as I said, has been announced, and some preliminary work has already been done as of the last 5 months. So indeed, we're going to have a substantial new capacity for LNG terminals to be imported, for LNG to be imported. And as Martin, you know very well, the IGB has started operating about a month and a half ago. Consequently, exports to Bulgaria through Siderokastro, which is the usual one, have gone up almost 300% in the 9-month year period 2022 vis-a-vis the equivalent 9 months in 2021. And IGB has already provided about 2 terawatt hours in the very short period that it has started operating. So indeed, a number of developments in the infrastructure sector, all of which would make Greece very capable to meet its own needs, reduce its dependence on Russian gas, but also be able to supply the rest of the Balkans. How much will depend on a number of things. To remind you, we're also connected to the TAP. The Greek natural gas TSO has a very ambitious plan until 2025 to upgrade the capacity of the existing network, including compression stations all over the place, to increase the current capacity of IGB from about 1 BCM per annum to about 3 in a year or so, and up to 5 maybe later on. So indeed, as far as infrastructure plans are concerned, we're still going ahead full speed. Now, what full speed means, it'll be very, I think we'll need to be very careful, because Constanza comment on looking at long-term or medium and long-term and try to discount a little bit the short-term market signals with due diligence on that and caution needs to be kept in mind. That also goes for the natural gas power plants in Greece. Right now, there are at least 4 new units of about 800 megawatts each under planning. Some of them have already passed the permitting stages, and the companies that are thinking of building them are trying to make up their minds on whether to go ahead or not. At the same time, the latest developments on prices have made actually lignite plants very attractive and almost lucrative. And that has put a lot of pressure on the Public Power Corporation to continue to operate its lignite plants, and even invest a little bit on upgrading the lignite facilities. Luckily, nobody has said anything about scuttling the 2028 deadline for all lignite power plants to be shut down in Greece. but the earlier plans to cut down on those by 2023-24 are clearly not on the table anymore. In the meantime, though, on the short term, there are some interesting things that have happened that we need to keep in mind and also take them into account in the planning, the medium and long-term planning, as I said before. One is that the prices have made the use of natural gas by industry in Greece cut by about 60-70%. And there's complaints about that from the industry, and competition problems have arisen, and that might somehow or other reflect also on the political positions that Greece might have to look at and put on the table at the European level. So that is one of the aspects that we need to keep in mind in all this. At the same time, the liquid LNG import in Greece has changed substantially. Imports from the United States have gone up about 135%, from 8 to about 18. And the rest of the sources, which are basically Egypt and Algeria, have remained about the same level. We're getting a little bit from TAP as well. So as far as the security of supply is concerned, I don't think there is that much of a concern in Greece. I'm already at 5 minutes, I think, so I better stop. But I just wanted to also throw in one last comment, which has to do with the fact that the Greek ship owners are rubbing their hands together from pleasure, because they're making a lot of money out of all this thing, and they will continue to make a lot of money out of this thing in the near future. You know, the numbers of the order of $500,000 per day per ship have been mentioned. So, you know, I don't know what to say, but you know, I wish I were a Greek ship owner at this point in time. I'll close with just one bit, which has to do with the fact that indeed the residential sector, the natural gas companies in Greece have been trying to increase penetration of natural gas use, and it's not clear whether that will stop in the near future. Heat pumps indeed is a way to look at it, but please keep in mind that heat pumps can also be used for cooling, and that needs also to be factored in. I'll better start here because Martin, I think, will shut me off anyway. Thanks for listening to me, and thank you for the opportunity to address all this august group of people around.
Thank you so much, Dimitri, and thank you for flagging the how, you know, CSD calls them the enablers, you know, the Greek shipping companies that have been making a lot of money also from shipping Russian oil across the world. And you know, and you also implied the role that Greece is having in also attracting some Russian LNG to the region. So this is an interesting angle. You know, LNG is a backdoor for Russian gas supply. So this could be an interesting development. Last but not least, I'm happy to give the floor to Gennady Kundarev, who is a senior associate for Central and Eastern Europe at E3G, an organization that has been on the forefront in Europe for assessing the different strategies for the acceleration of the decarbonization process and the implementation of the REPowerEU. Gennady, the floor is yours, and please be very brief as we have many questions in the Q&A. Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. A few words and a few things that I think was still not mentioned, and I can try to add to the bigger picture. First of all, the new proposed European policies related to clean energy and the energy transition will inevitably lead to a shrinking of the space for gas in the EU between 30 and 50%, to be precise, 29 to 52%, depending on what is going to be accepted as a final package. Bulgaria is also subject to this shrinking space. So I think that overly ambitious expectations that gas is going to be a growing business should be well reconsidered. Bulgaria also, when we look at the GDP unit per use of gas ratio, is well above the European average, which speaks that we do have a lot of room for energy efficiency improvement in our processes and the way that the industry and economy based on gas functions. When we look at all the alternative gas sources, I think it was already mentioned that it is not good to rely on autocratic regimes, but I don't think that also there is much choice when we try to look for alternative sources for gas, and we should keep this in mind. In the future, this can also bring a lot of unpleasant surprises and arm twisting for Europe. Most of the key infrastructure that was expected for the diversification of gas supply is already at place, and I'm not sure that much beyond that actually makes sense for Bulgaria. In Bulgaria, with our 3 billion cubic meters of annual gas consumption, the biggest consumer of this fossil gas is actually Sofia District Heating, a municipally owned enterprise, which there were some speculations that it might be nationalized in the coming for the upcoming winter, but it is still an entity that can be it can be overhauled with just a political decision, and this is something that can be done. And even if we don't consider bringing the use of fossil gas to zero in a plant like Sofia District Heating, it can be significantly decreased by a number of measures in the coming years. If it's well planned, if it's a subject to strategy for a modern district heating that is based on renewable energies. Even when we consider just an overhaul of the existing capacity, this can bring a number of efficiencies, but of course the plans can go well beyond that with the involvement of renewable energies that like solar water industrial collectors that can replace at least the use of the need for gas during most of the year when mostly hot water is needed in Sofia District Heating. There is something that I still observe around the sea region, and it is the fact that even though, so this includes Bulgaria and all the other countries, even though we are on the front line in the current international situation, the plans for gas usage and fuel are still not reconsidered. We still don't hear the bell ringing, and this is something that needs to take place. But I will speak at the end when I come to your questions. Just a brief word about Greece. I think that Greece is currently so to say a two-faced giant. On one hand, Greece is going to a very ambitious use of renewables and likely moving to 85% target in the power sector by 2030. And at the same time, Greece is a big gas giant that is trying to sell also gas to everyone in the region, which is quite beneficial in the current situation, because I don't think that we could have managed without the quick interconnections with Greece. But in the future, this is quite a strong position that also has to be reconsidered. It hasn't been, and at the end, it hasn't been very useful. Also, the recent nuclear and gas push that is coming from the US. Nuclear power plants, they simply cannot come on time to be solution to anything. And it seems that this is promoted all over the region, and it deserves some special attention. Just the example of Poland, just recently concluding a deal with Westinghouse to build their first nuclear reaction in 2033, which is a no response to the current crisis. So is with the gas push. I think that indeed there's a lot of gas infrastructure so that we can buy gas from all over the world, including the US at the moment. This is built in a rush, but then there's now a renewed push for reconsidering the plans for shale gas developments. None of the local gas sources, even if there are some and there is some potential, can be developed in this short time period in the critical next winters, even if we start from scratch right now. To your three questions, Martin, that you posed. How CE can face the gas shortage in 2023, 2024? I think that there's not much that can be done further than seriously considering some savings. And I don't think that the region has been serious enough about these measures. And as a bit of a counterbalance to the proposed long-term contracts, I think it is very important to stick to the idea to common European procurement for gas. Only as a bloc, the European Union can have enough weight to avoid being placed in a long-term dependency and long-term deals for fossil gas. And this should be fully exploited without countries playing here any individual games that can jeopardize the efforts of everyone else, especially small countries like Bulgaria that can easily be cannibalized by the big players in the EU. I think it's totally in our interest to stick to this idea. In the long term, what are the necessary steps for gas phase out? I think it is a no-brainer that expansion of domestic, that expansion of domestic gas networks, so for direct heating and use, should simply be abandoned. This has no future also in a more green hydrogen scenario for the future, because it is simply way less efficient to burn renewable hydrogen directly for heating in the households than it's reproducing again a renewable electricity, which can then be fed into heat pump, which is I think hiding the biggest potential for the moment. And in general, renewable energies simply remain our best shot for the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gennady. This was a great overview. And thank you to all the speakers during this very, very interesting discussion. I'm rushing directly to the chat and to the Q&A, where there were many very, very interesting questions. And Melanie has been raising her hand for some time, and I'll start with the questions directed to her. And I'm going to read them out one by one, starting with Mr. Steve Powell, who is asking about global efforts to reduce demand for energy through lessening industry growth and population control. What is your opinion? Do you think this is feasible? And then I'll read them all so that we can save some time. The other question is, do you see more pipelines being built from Northeast America, where cheap gas exists, to Louisiana to lower the Henry Hub price, thereby lowering the European gas price? And the last one is on nuclear from Otilian Nuto, who is asking whether there is a way to sanction Russia's nuclear industry and undermine the dependence of Europe on Russian nuclear technology and fuel. Thank you.
Yes, and I'm sorry, I raised my hand because I have another meeting I have to go to. So
sorry for that.
Yeah, wanted to say a few things on population. The growth in world population by 2050, which I have looked at in detail, is pretty stunning. India will become the most populous country on the planet. It will add another 500 million people to its population, and Modi has made universal access to electricity a major a platform in his administration. And right now, 500 million people don't have access to electricity in India. So you're talking about adding 1 billion people to one country, okay, by 2050, and giving them access to electricity. And India is sitting on a pile of lignite coal. And so my suspicion is they will end up using their coal, and they're building coal plants right now. I know they're doing renewables as well, but Nigeria becomes the third most populous country on the planet, replacing the United States. And so that's obviously in the least developed continent, and they have a lot of oil. And so those issues to me raise concerns about the need for carbon capture and sequestration, quite frankly, because just those two examples are countries that are going to be using their fossil fuels. On pipelines, Ruslan mentioned the workshop that we are having in January. That is for the second phase of global gas. That is where the second phase, we're going to do a very deep dive on two regions of the world, Europe and Asia. You saw in my slides why we need to focus on Europe and Asia in a natural gas study. The first phase, we just had 9 think tanks around the world pull together experts and talk about the different needs. And there were very, very different needs by region and interest in natural gas. And that was pre-Ukraine. So in the workshop that we are having, if we are going to continue to supply LNG to the world and to Europe, we're now the number one LNG exporter in the world. We're going to need to produce domestic gas domestically. And all of the things that are associated with domestic production, including pipelines and LNG export terminals, et cetera, et cetera. So that will be a major topic of discussion. And the nuclear industry and sanctions on Russia are, I think that's going to have to be almost an individual country decision. Because of the varying degrees of dependency of those countries on the fuel that Russia provides and the nuclear waste issues that as I mentioned, are associated with the VVER. I just wanted to say a couple other things that were raised by earlier speakers. The electricity producing heat at 100 to 200 degrees. Just so people understand, the steel needed to make a wind turbine requires temperatures of 3,000 degrees. So right now, I mean, we can talk all we want about 100 to 200 degrees. Steel for wind turbines, 1,500 to 3,000 degrees. And and wind turbine blades are made with oil. And it's fiberglass is the base is oil. So we've got to be very thoughtful about our transition and the sequence policies to get us there and sequence investments. And one other thing on the cost of renewables, and I've looked at the data extensively, do not include the cost of battery storage. And in the US, and these are EIA numbers, $36 roughly for wind. The battery storage is $120 for a megawatt hour. And it's 4 hours of storage. And so we've got to be thoughtful and look at the limitations of the technologies and what the full costs are and needs are for those technologies. And so that's just a few other points. So.
Thank you so much, Melanie. This was very extensive, and I see that it provoked quite a flurry of reactions and raising hands.
Mine went up when they spoke. So
thank you for coming to the meeting, and I hope we can organize something similar in the very near future. And good luck to the decarbonization panel in January. as well.
I'm happy to stay for 2 more minutes and
Yeah.
yeah.
Actually, I'll take this chance to ask Andreas to comment on your ideas about heat, and maybe to discuss briefly another question from the chat, which is on the role of decarbonization of district heating, especially considering the results from our assessment together with Agora. And then Gennady, maybe he can also comment on this issue as well. And then we'll end with Constanza answering the big question: do we need a gas price cap? Thanks. Andreas?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to briefly react to this point on the temperature of heating. I mean, the reality is that we use a lot of our natural gas in industry currently to heat buildings and warehouses, etc. And for low temperature process heating, 40% is in this range. So it doesn't really matter whether, blast furnaces are currently mainly operated to produce primary steel, although I would mention that we use electric arc furnaces for a large share of our steel production, because we have this massive potential here within the range of heat pumps to be electrified. So we did a study for Germany, and we estimated that by 2030, 95 terawatt hours of natural gas could be replaced through electrification. That's a huge amount, right? I mean, that's larger than.
I don't disagree with anything you said. But to make steel, you need 3,000 degrees. So I mean, for the heat to actually produce the steel, everything you said is absolutely correct, and we should be doing all of that. But you still need 3,000 degrees, and you need oil for turbine blades. It's just an example. So anyway, I am way over time for my meeting, so I got to run. But thank you all so much. This was great. I loved it. Thank you, guys. We'll see you soon.
Thank you, Melanie. See you soon.
Bye. Bye.
Okay, sorry, but I'm going to have to respond to that, because
yes,
it really doesn't matter that you need 3,000 degrees temperature to produce primary steel. It doesn't matter. In our conversation today, we're talking about natural gas. Where is the natural gas being used? It's often being used at low temperatures. You can use other. You can produce hydrogen with wind and solar. Add a little bit of biomass for the process, and with direct reduction of iron, produce steel. And you can also do it without the fossil fuels that we're talking about. So I think this is a complete moot point that simply distracts from the fact that we can do a lot with the technologies that we have. And in fact, this is just not worth talking about.
Thank you, Andreas. Gennady, please, a brief comment, because we are running over time and I don't want to keep our dear participants waiting. And
yes, and then I would love to jump on the district heating topic, but as you mentioned, it will be an intro before me. I just wanted to comment something also on the use of the new technologies. Many of the solutions are very close to being launched on the market, really just a few years away from. There's so many solutions. We don't count on one single solution for most of the needs. There are number of competing new technologies that are being developed out there and that are promising enough. And I think that also the industry very often has made their choice on assessing the economic and the technological potential of a certain technology. They all want to have technologies not that are subsidized, but that are dirt cheap and that they can sell and flood the market with. This is their ideal scenario when we think about the industry producing the new technologies. I think that also for example, the car makers were making their choice way back when we were still speculating, are the batteries the future of the electric mobility? Yes, they are, simply because there is no conversion, and the industry had already made their calculations before they started betting on this choice. And last, most of these technologies, they really aim to use, if possible, and there's a lot of research done so that we can stick to that, not rare earths, but elements that are broadly available in the Earth's crust. And the photovoltaic industry is an example of that, despite all the speculations. because the rare earths that are used are quite a minor quantity compared to silicon, which is one of the most broadly available elements on the planet.
Thank you, Gennady. Very, very brief from Dimitri, and then final word from Constanze, and I'm closing this panel. Thank you.
Very quickly. Yes, indeed, nobody said that we're going to throw away all oil. We do make turbine blades from oil, but that's not burning it. And also the 1500 to 3000 is a very wide range for temperatures to. We just said I countersign. So.
Thank you, Dimitri. I mean, this is exactly what we wanted to achieve, a heated discussion for the role of natural gas, what is possible, what is feasible. Finally, Constanze, is it possible to have a diversified European gas market with a non-liberalized solution or gas price cap? And maybe do you see alternative supply of natural gas to the region from Cyprus and the East Med? Is that feasible? Isn't that too costly? Final words, please. Thanks.
Yeah, on the price cap, I think most of the panelists here would agree that this is a huge disappointment with so much administrative capacity wasted on the European and on the national level about discussing and trying to come up with this price cap idea, which in the end will probably never get triggered. And if it gets triggered, the thing we risk with the price cap is that we are switching one problem, which is the high natural gas prices, with another problem, which would be natural gas shortages, because Europe needs high gas prices to bring the sufficient LNG capacity that we need, the LNG supply, to replace the gas that we are missing because of Russia's unilateral supply cuts. And we need the high gas price to incentivize investments in efficiency, because artificially bringing the price down will just confuse and delay the natural processes that we have in the market that will incentivize this major shift that we need to that needs to happen. And regarding the additional supply from the East Med, I mean, additional infrastructure investments need to be considered very carefully, because if we overinvest in natural gas infrastructure, yes, maybe we will get a very diversified mix, but maybe we will not have enough money to invest in things like renewable energies, infrastructure investments, and really the things that need our focus most and would be most productive from a sustainable long-term perspective. So I think this is what I wanted to add.
Thank you, Constanze. This was a great conclusion to a great discussion. Thank you so much to all the panelists, Andreas Graf, Agora Energy vendor Dimitri Lalas, Facets, Gennady Kundarev, IFRG, Dr. Ivan Ivanov from the Bulgarian Energy Regulator, and last but not least, Constanze Rangirova from our own program. Thank you so much. Looking forward to other events like that. Please tune in for Q1 natural gas event that we're planning, which will be probably live. We'll be happy to share the full insights of our gas phase-out study, and we'll be happy to see you there again. Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.